Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace. Strengthening the saints against Islam's assault on North America.
Well, thank you, folks, for joining us here today at Fortress of Faith. This is Tom Wallace. Folks, I got a lot to cover today, and we're going to go down a different road. We normally deal with Islam, the Christian apologetics, and evangelism of Muslims. But today we're going to talk about the family, training up a child. You know, folks, we sometimes really get this wrong idea that that they're doing their job as parents simply by raising their children. And we're going to talk about how to train up a child. The Bible says in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 6, train up a child in the way he should go. And so this is what I want to talk about today. We need good families. Oh, how that is so much needed. And I believe there's so many people out there who want to be good fathers, want to be good mothers. They want to have good, obedient children, respectful children, polite children. They want to have good families. But it's like when I was younger and I'd hear the preacher preach and I was convicted and I wanted to do what God wanted me to do. But I sometimes would sit there wishing that the preaching would simply tell me how. How do I do this? And so that's what we're going to deal with today. We're kind of talk about some of these practical things, the how. Now, there's a lot of parental frustration out there. And it is difficult. Raising kids is hard. The Bible tells us in Psalms chapter 58, verse 3, the wicked are estranged from the womb. They go astray as soon as they be born, speaking lies. The Bible tells us we don't come into this world perfect people. We come in with the curse of the sin nature, and that nature of sin there is with us the moment we're born, and we go to work deploying that wickedness and that sinfulness. And so training is necessary. Training is necessary to train out that selfishness in a child and replace it with thankfulness. Train away that rebellion and replace it with obedience. Train away that carelessness and instill it with thoughtfulness. Train away that rudeness that's naturally there and transform that child into politeness. Train away disrespect and replace it with respect. And so there's a lot of work that's on the table here. It's not easy. If it were, then everyone would be succeeding. And so let me give you some tips. Let me give you some practical things today on how to train up a child. Number one, training is not raising. Let me say that again. Training is not raising. You can feed the child, clothe the child, send them to school, teach them the basics of life and educate them in these in the things of the world and keep them alive and healthy, but that is not training. Imagine an athlete with his coach. A coach can get him in his uniform and can give him a playbook and put him in the game, but that does not mean that the coach has trained the athlete. Training requires work. It requires some things that needs to be put in, and discipline needs to be put into it. And so we're going to get into some of these practical things here. So please understand, number one, that training is not raising. Number two, training is being consistent. You have to be consistent, and this is the secret sauce. How many times people start to implement the right training and the right things that they want from their kids, but they lack being consistent. They start off well, but they mess up and they give up. And it is easy to give up. And so you have to be consistent. You always got to be training, always got to be expecting the child to respond the way you want them to respond, politely, quickly, and obediently to what you are requiring them to do. And you must be consistent about it all the time. You never give up. You never give in. And this is the secret sauce. Training is being consistent. Number three, training is creating teachable moments. Training is creating teachable moments. I would, at times with my kids, I would be downstairs. My kids would be upstairs playing. and I would create a teachable moment. I'd call one of my kids, "Hey, come on down here." And I'd expect them to listen and hear my voice. I always expected my kids, no matter if we were in a crowded room with a lot of people there, and if I said something that I felt was loud enough for them to hear and understand, I expected them to always be listening to my voice and respond. And so the kids would be upstairs playing, doing their thing there, and I'd call one of them down, and I didn't really need them to do something for me, but I would call them down to do something to create a teachable moment. Are they going to respond? Are they going to be obey? Are they going to be quick? And all these things, are they going to do what I've told them to do with gladness, with a cheerful heart? And so these were creating teachable moments. When I lived in England, one of the places I lived, it was up in Harrogate. And next to us was a mounted police division. They had the stables, about 5 or 6 horses there. And the policeman who rode the horses there lived in that little community. And one day I was talking to one of them in the park, and he was telling me, that, they'd been out for about 8 hours, and it was time to get the horse in for his training. And I thought, wow, I thought to be taking him in for the night, for the break. And he said, no. We always go through teaching when they're tired and cranky. And that's when we want to work with them, because if we can get them to respond correctly to the situations that we put in front of them, especially when they're tired and cranky, then when they're fresh and alert and everything else first thing in the morning, and they're in a crowded situation around other people and so on there, then we know that they're going to respond well then, because they responded for us when they were tired and cranky. So I thought, wow, I need to put those teachable moments when my children were tired and cranky. And by the way, also let me throw this in. If a trainer only gets an animal to behave and do what they want them to do when they're being yelled at, what does it teach the animal? That I only have to obey when they're only serious when they yell. And many parents make that same mistake with their kids. Kid waits till the parent is mad and yelling at them, and that's when they respond. You want to train them to respond when you speak gently and clearly and politely, and get them to respond right then and there. And also, by the way, always expect them to obey the first time they're told. Number 4, training requires restrictions. Training requires restrictions. Sometimes we need to hold firm and straight the way that we want them. By the way, we want to train to raise them up, train up a child. So we want them to stand, straight and right and do what's right. Let me give you an example. When I was also living in England, we were praying about a house and some things that we were asking of the Lord that He would provide for us. And one of the things we wanted to do was have some place where we could play volleyball, because we like bringing kids over from the church and we play volleyball. And God gave us one better. It wasn't on our property. It was right out in front of our house, and the city mowed it. And but outside they had planted these trees. And they put these posts, these stumps, right next to the trees, little trees, maybe about 2 years old. And these stumps there the trees were tied to these things. And I got to think, what a wonderful example. That's training up that tree to grow straight. When the winds come and the kids come and play around it there, that stump there is going to hold that tree straight. But later on, once those trees got standing straight on their own, they came along and cut the stump away. And that's kind of like how the parent is. We're not needed anymore if we've done our job training. A wonderful example, I thought of that. And I'm reminded also, too, about training requires restrictions. There's a poem of a horse wishing to be free from his fences and thinking his master doesn't love him. If he loved him, he'd let him run free through the meadows and stuff. And so the horse just couldn't take the restrictions anymore, so he jumped over the fence, ran down the hill into the road, and got killed by a semi-truck. Our restrictions are there for safety. The restrictions are needed. All right, number 5, quickly. Number 5, training requires resolve. Training requires resolve. Remember, you're the boss. They're not. One of the things my daughter used to get into so much trouble. She was the firstborn, and she was always wanting to boss her little brother. And she was just there, just his little boss. And boy, she got into so much trouble for that, probably more than anything. And one of the things we sometimes would do is if they, we'd have them go stand in the corner, but I'd have them repeat, something so that they would learn not to do this again. And so I remember one time I sent my daughter to the corner and to repeat, "I'm not a boss. I'm not a boss. I'm not a boss." And so I sent her to the corner, and boy, she was mad. She was, "I'm not a boss. I'm not a boss." That lasted for about a minute, and then the tears started going, "I'm not a boss. I'm not a..." It was so cute. But, we need to instill into them that you're resolved, that you're the boss, you're the parent, you're the adult here, and the child isn't. And one day they will get to be the boss. All right, quickly, number 6. Training often requires pain to protect. Training often requires pain to protect. The Bible says, Proverbs 22:15, "Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him." Proverbs 13:24, "He that spareth the rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes." A doctor, sometimes in order to clean a wound or to bring healing to the body, has to stick that needle into the tender wound to provide a tetanus injection, a shot there, to fight against infection. And even though he knows that what's going to hurt he's doing that for the good of the child. So sometimes pain is necessary for their protection. And I tell you, also too, let me read this to you. Proverbs 20, verse 30. "The blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil, so do stripes the inward parts of the belly." When a person does wrong and they have guilt within them, and if you don't deal with bringing a discipline to them for the wrong that they've done, then that guilt can bring self-loathing in their heart. It might lead to self-harm. And so sometimes we fail our children by not bringing discipline when they have done wrong, because inside they know that they've done wrong. Their conscience bears witness of that. All right. And by the way, this is so important, and let me park here for a moment. Punishment is not discipline. Yes, spanking is a biblical concept, but I want to tell you, parents, that when you strike another child, you need to be disciplined in the way you bring out your discipline to your child. Don't do it to punish them. Punishment is not discipline. Discipline is a spanking that's controlled. They understand what they've done wrong, and they're loved after the moment that they have been disciplined and brought back to fellowship with you. But sometimes parents, you've got to watch yourself, because we get angry and we can't discipline. We can't punish them when we're angry. We have to be disciplined ourselves. Well, we're out of time. But let me close. Let me remind you. Let me review. Training is not raising. Training is being consistent. Training is creating teachable moments. That's important. Training requires restrictions. Training requires resolve. And training often requires pain to protect. God bless you. God bless your families. May we raise them in the admonition of the Lord, and may God bless you.